Something new today. I'm home alone for the rest of the evening, so I thought I wanted to try making a usual kind of video, but as a live stream. It's purely out of laziness, since I don't have to do any editing afterwards. I don't have to encode and then upload, make a thumbnail, all of the normal difficulties that go with making videos. I figured I could just live stream me talking, and you could deal with me sneezing, making noises, forgetting my train of thought, and all of the things that I usually cut out. You could just deal with it. So my concept for today, if you saw my last video, I hope you did, because it's not going to make much sense otherwise, but I figured the kind of people who would be tuned in on the live stream would be the kind of people who would be up to date on my videos. At the moment I'm reading Intellectuals and Society by Thomas Sowell, and that was partly the inspiration for some of my review of Whig and Peer. Was also informed by this, which has just been on my mind lately. And I read a passage in it that was just... I don't know if you've ever read a book that, or just like heard something or read something where you just, something strikes you as just so obviously true that you'd never even noticed it before, you'd never even thought about it, but once you hear it you go like, yes, that is accurate, that's actually true, that explains so much about, you know, how I thought the world worked but couldn't put into words myself. And that was this topic. That was this passage about income distribution that Thomas Sowell writes about. I'll give a brief overview of Intellectuals in Society. It's a book about intellectuals, as you might be able to guess. Thomas Sowell doesn't have much of a good opinion of intellectuals, although you could say that he is one. He has much more respect for what he calls mundane knowledge, which is the collective knowledge of everybody in a society who is not an intellectual, people who have specific knowledge of their area of expertise as a plumber or a carpenter, a business person, you know, people who just have normal jobs that aren't intellectuals, aren't academics. He believes that it's these individuals who have a better idea of how their lives work and how their lives should be governed and ruled than the intellectuals who think they have a very good idea of how things work, but actually they don't. They only have an idea of their own field of study, and not much of the outside world. One of the ideas that often gets talked about by the intellectuals, who he also calls the anointed or the intelligentsia, sort of he rotates between those few terms. This entire chapter is called Intellectuals and Economics, where he talks about the misconceptions that often get spread around by the left, by intellectuals, academics, journalists who don't really understand economics but have these kind of misconceptions. And one of these misconceptions is about income distribution, which I'll just read this for you. This seemed very profound to me, but I don't know if it'll strike you the same way. I mean, obviously it'll make more sense in context of the chapter, but I should just say now that I'm very bad at reading aloud. I'll probably have difficulty with this. If I ever read a passage aloud in a video, it takes several takes, and I usually splice together a few takes. That's how bad it is. I can't even get through a single take of reading a paragraph without making a mistake. So I'm going to do my best, okay? Be forgiving. Typical of the mindset of many intellectuals was a book by Andrew Hacker, which referred to the trillions of dollars that became the personal income of Americans each year, and said, just how this money is apportioned will be the subject of this book. But this money is not apportioned at all. It becomes income through an entirely different process. The very phrase income distribution is tendentious. It starts the economic story in the middle, with a body of income and wealth existing somehow, leaving only the question as to how that income or wealth is to be distributed or apportioned, as Professor Hacker puts it. In the real world, the situation is quite different. In a market economy, most people receive income as a result of what they produce, supplying other people with some goods or services that those people want, even if that service is only labor. Each recipient of these goods and services pays according to the value which that particular recipient puts on what is received, choosing among alternative suppliers to find the best combination of price and quality, both as judged by the individual who's paying. Yeah, so that's basically economics in a nutshell. That's the free market working. Am I out of focus? Is this helping? Okay. That's just describing the process of how money gets distributed in the economy. Maybe he went on further than that. I'll continue actually. I'll read the rest of the passage. This mundane utilitarian process is quite different from the vision of income distribution projected by those among the intelligentsia who invest that vision with moral angst. If there really were some pre-existing body of income or wealth produced somehow, manna from heaven as it were, then there would be of course a moral question as to how such a large share each member of society should receive. But wealth is produced, it does not just exist somehow. Where millions of individuals are paid according to how much they produce is valued subjectively by millions of other individuals. It is not at all clear on what basis third parties could say some goods and services are overvalued or undervalued, that cooking should be less or more valuable than carpentry, for example, much less that not working at all is rewarded enough compared to working. So he's just saying that income or wealth, sorry, I'm just trying to get in focus. Income or wealth is not just brought from heaven, like manna from heaven is the expression he uses. It's not just bestowed on a country to divide up in some way that it sees fit. There's no wealth in a country. You know, there's no amount of money that just exists in America ready to be given out to people arbitrarily based on how much some group of people think is that person is worth. There's nobody giving CEOs large portions of money just because they think the CEO needs it, and the nurses and all the people who do relatively lower paid jobs don't need it as much or aren't worthy of it as much. It's I don't really know how to explain it because it just seems so obvious, and yet I read that passage and thought this so well explains what I should have been saying to my friend at the party, who I mentioned in my last video, who asked me why is, if there's enough wealth for everybody to be fed and housed, why is it that some people have no house and no food? Why is it that some people have everything they need and some people don't, when there is enough wealth for that not to be the case? If there was enough wealth to feed everybody, why are there still hungry people? And it's because of this, because the wealth isn't manna from heaven. There's not just wealth existing somehow. It's apportioned. It's not even apportioned, it's created. The people who create wealth have wealth. When you get paid for a job, you're not just being rewarded like a dog who does a trick and then you give them a treat. You're not just being rewarded for behaving well. That's not society going, oh, good job, have some money. You're creating the amount of wealth approximately that you're getting back in money. That is why you get paid for that. And although economics doesn't work perfectly, the market doesn't work perfectly, and often people can coast by in jobs where they effectively provide nothing, if they're very good at bluffing or just lying. There are some completely useless people, right? I'm sure we've all worked with someone who's terrible at their job, and it would be better if they weren't there at all. But most people, on the whole, only get paid because they're actually providing a service that is worth that amount of money, or actually is worth more than that amount of money. Otherwise, the trade wouldn't take place. You need to trade for something that is of greater value than what you're providing. I don't know, that seemed important to me. Just that passage. And the rest of the book, of course. The whole thing the whole chapter about economics is interesting. It sort of dispels a lot of myths, sort of just so stories, is what you might call them. I wonder how the stream is doing, because it was orange before. It might be red. I might have dropped out already. Okay, I'm still orange. Alright. What do you guys think of that? If you haven't worked with someone useless, you were the useless person. And I hope that's not true. Cool. I actually can't read all these comments because I was talking for too long and wasn't keeping up. But thank you for writing everything. I was just talking to Benjamin Boyce today. We did a video together about the coddling of the American mind, so you can look out for that next week. He was talking about monetizing my channel, and apparently you have to apply for monetization 6 months in advance, something. So I was thinking I might just apply for it, and then, you know, in 6 months' time I could decide whether actually to monetize videos. But I do wonder if I do streams more often. Well, for one thing, I'm going to need better internet access to yeah, to make streams even possible, because I think at the moment it's only just about possible. But, you know, I'll have to pay for that better internet access, and the one way I could pay for that is by doing super chats. So all of you watching could ask questions, and I could actually be able to read what you're saying, because at the moment there's just too much. I can't talk and read your comments at the same time, unfortunately. Okay, I actually did write down a bunch of stuff. Something else I wanted to talk about that passage was just about this idea that some of the most profound truths in life and in politics, in ethics, in everything that's important in life, just because something's obvious to you, it doesn't mean it's obvious to everybody else. There's this so my throat's a bit scratchy. There's this idea, and you've probably experienced this. God, I'm croaky. Once you learn something, it's very difficult for you to sympathize with someone who does not know that thing. For instance, I find it completely impossible to teach anybody algebra, because algebra is second nature to me at this point. I can, algebraic expressions and equations and functions look as simple to me as just writing on a page. Like it just the meaning of the expressions jump out to me immediately. The meaning immediately enters my brain without me having to actually figure anything out. That's not. I'm sorry if that sounds like bragging, but it's just because I've done so much of it, and it's just second nature, to the point where if somebody asks me how do you do algebra, like what does this mean? Like I can't explain it without just repeating the same thing over and over again, right? I can't. I find myself just talking in circles because it makes perfect sense to me, and I cannot put myself in the shoes of someone who does not understand what I'm saying. And that is just, it's true of concrete things like that you have to teach. But when you're sharing ideas with somebody, a similar thing happens. It can happen. The further you are from someone politically, especially if they are more sheltered from outside opinions, as some people often are, they might not even understand the words you're using, and you might perceive that they are being obstinate. They're not understanding your purpose, or maybe it seems like they're dodging your questions, but actually they just literally do not understand what you're saying to them, because politically people have these paradigms set up in their head, like this thing about the manna from heaven, the wealth of a country being divided among people. That's a paradigm you can have in your head without even realizing that is the paradigm that you're working with. Is paradigm the right word? When you believe that, you do not even think about that being true. It just is true, and you base all of your arguments and your assumptions on that. When I already understood this what I just read to you on some level. That's why when my friend asked me, why is it that there are people going hungry when there is enough money to feed everyone, when there's enough food to feed everyone, why there's some people who still don't have money and still don't have food. I did not even understand the question, because I understood that people create value, and that value is what feeds them. That's how you feed yourself and your family in life, is by creating value for other people, and they will pay you for the value that you're creating. There is no value without people. There's nothing to divide up. So when I get asked a question that is from a completely different paradigm, I understand each word in the question, and yet the question doesn't make sense. And I think it's really useful to be able to describe the paradigm that you're working in. If you can describe your world model, the model of the world that you make your assumptions on in your head, your worldview, you don't even have to explain it out loud. As long as you yourself understand it in words that you can explain, you can understand better how someone else might not understand that, if that makes sense. So now today, if my friend asked me the same question, I would give him a summary basically of what I just read to you here, the manna from heaven, or lack thereof. There is no manna from heaven. There's just, the only wealth that exists is the wealth that we create as individuals. The only wealth that we have is the wealth that we create. And it's difficult because when your parents raise you, as most people do, when you're a child, whether you have parents or if you're an orphan or whatever, you're not creating anything. You're not creating wealth for anyone. You're useless, effectively. You're just an investment waiting to pay off. So your parents are giving you everything. And I think it's easy to get into, without even realizing it, to get into this idea that you have a certain a right to these things: the shelter, food, warmth, a minor amount of entertainment, some interest, some meaning in your life. These are things you're entitled to, not explicitly, but just because that's been happening your entire life up to the point where you're at university or when you're providing for yourself. You get this idea that things just appear, that food just appears in the cupboards and on your dinner table. And that, maybe that sounds like I'm being condescending or saying that people who have this idea are stupid. They're not. It's not literally an idea. It's an idea you don't even know you have. So even when you get older and you understand that things cost money, and to get money you have to work, you can understand all of these things, but because you've spent your whole life getting things for free, it's hard to translate that specific knowledge about those specific things, about how money gets you to buy things, and how if you buy things you can then eat them. Is this making sense? You can know those specific things and not fully comprehend on a basic intuitive level why that is the case, right? It's possible to go your entire life having a job, feeding yourself, supporting yourself economically, and still not properly understand that everything you own, you have earned, and not just in the sense that you deserve it on some cosmic level because you're a good person. I mean, earned as in you created that wealth. I created enough wealth to buy myself this phone, right? At some point, but actually, my husband bought me this. But if I could have something at arm's reach that I bought myself, why is that so difficult? It makes me look so spoiled at this point. I didn't have to tell you that. I bought this. Can you tell? Look, this is something that someone else. This is a mouse, by the way, if you can't tell. someone else made this. The company, you know, someone molded the plastic for it, somebody designed it, someone made the battery that goes inside, all the sensors and all of that thing. Someone else made it, but I made the money to buy it. And the process by which my work at the job that I work at becomes wealth for someone is actually quite a few steps removed. And the idea that that wealth is somehow worth the same amount as the money that I used to exchange for this, it's not that easy to comprehend all of the steps that went into me creating wealth, this thing being an equivalent amount of wealth to the what does it cost, like £8, and that exchange being part of a larger scheme of the economy. I really don't know if this makes sense. It's not easy to comprehend, is what I'm saying. I'm not making fun of anybody who doesn't understand this, because I myself did not understand this fully until I just read this. I bought the clothes on my back. This was a present. This shirt was a present from my grandfather. I bought this shirt